Hello, story seekers. I'm Nico.
I'm Ben, and you're listening to The Tiny Bookcase.
Our guest for this episode is not only a talented short story writer and novelist, they are also a chef.
Their debut novel was featured by The Observer as one of the top 10 debuts of 2021. It is titled Moth and is an atmospheric tale of a family in Delhi as they plan a wedding during partition. We'd like to welcome Melody Razak.
Hello, Melody.
Hi, hello.
Oh, lovely to speak to you.
Thank you for having me.
It's quite all right. Your novel sounds fascinating. Was it really exciting to be sort of put in that list? I would imagine that would be a fairly awesome thing to achieve.
It was very exciting. I was in Tbilisi in Georgia at the time, working on a second novel when I got the email from my publicity guys, and it felt very, very exciting. Yeah, it was one of those moments where you actually think that you're misreading something, and then you have to read it again and think like, oh, okay, it is The Observer. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Did you get the that moment of, oh shit, I didn't mean to be good. I was just doing it because I wanted to do it. Because
I was kind of thinking I was doing it because I love writing and I really want to do it. And then that moment when you think, oh, and maybe I'm quite good. And that felt really exciting. You know, maybe people will read it.
Oh, that's lovely.
That's what we like to hear.
We would very rarely get a chef on though, so we might also be asking you questions about
Yep.
food.
Yeah, do.
Because I read the piece that you then wrote in the summer last year, I think, for The Guardian.
Oh, for The Observer, Food Monthly.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was all framed through your experiences with food, and
Yep.
you attribute a lot of your success, or at least your work ethic, to working in various kitchens.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, because I think, people always tell me that I'm very disciplined, but I'm not naturally a disciplined person. And it's just working in kitchens for near enough 20 years where you are working towards plating up food for customers in a very short space of time, and each plate's got to be completely perfect, and there's very little room for error. You do tend to build up a work ethic that I don't think I would have had otherwise. So in that way, it's easier for me now to sit at my desk all day and write because I can do that. I can sit down and focus in a way that I wasn't always able to.
That's wonderful.
I quite like the idea of Gordon Ramsay screaming, "Where's the backstory?" at people. I think there's something to this.
And it sounded like you were quite immersed in the sort of the Brighton culinary scene.
Yeah, that's right. I've lived in Brighton for 20 years and I worked in a vegetarian restaurant called Terre à Terre for maybe on and off for 7 years. And then I worked as a pastry chef mostly, and then I decided to run my own business and decided to run my kitchen from home. And so I ended up supplying the other cafes and some other small restaurants in Brighton with their cakes. And eventually that led to me opening a cafe, which I ran for 8 years until I decided I was going to try writing.
Well, I think it's a really interesting arc that you this upwards arc
Yeah.
that you're on in your writing journey. And
Yeah.
and as you say, it does sound like a perfect mix of I don't even know what you'd call it, like discipline, I guess.
Yeah, and the thing with cooking is that you're constantly tasting and you're smelling and you're putting colours and flavours together. So I find that when I'm writing, I'm very much writing about the way things smell and taste and the colours. So in that way, I've kind of transferred that skill across, I think. I hope.
I like that. I like putting sensory stuff in my writing as well.
Yeah.
And reading it in other people's. It does transport you a bit. Oh, that's fantastic.
Well, I'm expecting some Michelin star stories today, then, gang. Let's get some of that good stuff. So, all the story seekers out there, you know the drill. You're about to get 3 new stories written to a shared prompt. Melody has chosen the prompt for this episode from a small selection, and it is First Time. Ben, you'll be serving our first course. Take it away.
Not sure how many Michelin stars this is going to get, but yeah, okay, I'll take the podium. First time. There are a lot of us in my family. We've spread out across counties, and our family tree branches over old borders. We aren't in one place anymore, but that tree still thrives and remains whole. I used to imagine how strong the roots must be to support us all stretched out like that, but in truth, it wasn't the tree. It was her that held us all together. She knew everyone's names, and every birthday was readily remembered. She was my father's mother, but she may as well have been everyone's grandmother. Once a year, we'd all travel to gather at her house. Not for her, she made it clear, but for each other. It never felt forced, and even as kids, we didn't need our arms twisted. It was just something our family did. Yet, I'd often find myself squinting with the strain of trying to keep up with all the faces. Then in she'd swoop, to supply a name, or hand someone a drink, or let us know that it was nearly time for the kick-off. The rugby was almost always on during those yearly parties, and the whole lot of us would assemble for the anthems. We sang our way through victories and defeats. She brought us together in a timeless way, a way that felt like it was permanent. She had a dragon's heart, or liked to say she did, and never stopped thinking of herself as Welsh. I'd find myself thinking of her whenever I put my cleats on by the school field, or turned the telly on to find the game, or when I queued to get through the revolving bars of the stadium's gates. That feeling of family, my family, stood with me in my heart to sing every time. When she passed, I couldn't pull myself together for days. Something that I'd too often taken for granted was gone. It only started to feel right when we found out about her wishes. We'd all travel one last time to gather with her, but not at her home, to a small church in Wales. I felt empty on the drive, nervous about something I couldn't control. Funerals always seemed bleak to me, and I was dreading losing myself to grief in front of the family. Yet the moment I turned off the motorway and started threading through the verdant hills, I began to feel something else. The rain clouds sliding away towards the sea seemed to be taking my worry with them, and the sun reminded me of those times we'd all met up in her garden. It was a strange mixture of acceptance and fondness, but I clung to it so I could climb out of the desolation. I was ready to see everyone again. The church was full as I helped carry her inside. My dad and uncles are all different sizes, so it took some effort to keep the coffin level. I saw some people were even having to stand at the back as we'd filled the bucolic church to bursting point. We lowered her onto the bier in the centre of the nave, and I found my place near the front. The priest led us on through the hymns, and a few of us were invited to speak a few words for her on the podium. All the while I was up there speaking, I was fighting against my throat's desire to close. I did it, but barely. There was a tension in the church I'd never felt in her garden, and I felt that anxious worry begin to return as rain rumbled against the old leads of the building. Then the priest spoke. All stand for our next song. Guide me, O thou great Jehovah. I stood, my heart heavy and ready for another dour dirge. Yet, the moment the organ began to play, I felt a lightning moment of recognition. My eyes had gone wide, so had Dad's, and we smiled at each other before leaning into a full-throated rendition of Bread of Heaven. We'd sung it in stadiums with thousands, in pubs with friends, and in her house with family. There are a lot of us in my family, and we all came forwards to sing. We drowned out the rain, and I felt pure joy in a way that made me feel like I'd been preparing for this moment my whole life. Prepared by her. Feed me till I want no more. We came to a glorious stop, but the organ continued. All of us, so full of gusto a moment before, realised for the first time that there were more verses as the locals carried up the song on. It was immediately clear we had but the shakiest of grasps on the rest of the words, and even the organist faltered at the sudden drop-off. So horrifying was the embarrassment that I snorted out a laugh. It came from a part of me I thought might have died in the bleakness of loss. Then my uncles joined in with their guffaws, and soon the church was filled with all of our spluttering laughter. That's what I'll remember about that day. The reminder that even if we don't remember everything all the time, we're still her family.
That was lovely.
It was. Yeah, it was really, really sweet. I really liked it.
You caught me on a lucky week there, Melody. I don't usually go that sweet.
Yeah. No, it
I
was very heartwarming and
Yes.
gentle.
Well,
almost visceral in the description of that sort of the feeling of being in that, as you described it, bucolic church as
Mm.
well. That, like, especially as knowing you're someone who doesn't hold much stock in the actual sort of religious value of those buildings. To talk about it with so much reverence to detail,
Mhm.
it's very, very nice. I don't want to say nice because nice is a bit of a shit word, but yeah, really well done, well played.
I appreciate that.
I really liked your line, the throat's desire to close, because I thought
Mm.
that was just summing up the grief in a very kind of subtle but very bodily way without the eruption of like all the wailing and the tears and the way some people write about grief. It was just a very contained bodily experience of it, which is often how things like that are.
I Yeah, thank you for noticing that. I fully agree. Like whenever I've been in these kind of situations, there's almost a panic because your body
Hmm.
it feels like your body's betraying you because it has a
Yeah.
mind of its own. Like it wants to stop doing
Hmm.
what you need it to do because of the the social obligations that you need to fulfill.
Hmm.
Um,
I
but
fully agree.
Yeah, exactly. But this is actually not from an experience that I've had. The One of the first things that we did with this podcast, well, really, its inception really, was that Nico took myself and some friends to the pub, and we started sharing stories. And he'd written a story that he wanted to share with us, and um, it sort of grew up from there. Really, like this idea that we wanted to share stories with each other and tell each other stories and all that stuff. And another very close friend of mine um, told me a version of this experience. This has happened to him, um, and literally at the pub last week. And I thought, well, that's a perfect way to continue that tradition on. So this is a story that's been told to me by somebody else,
Yeah.
a version of it anyway, and
Hmm.
I wanted to put that out there. I did
Yeah.
also make sure to get his permission to share the details about his
Yeah.
life
Yeah,
before I
because
did that.
I'm very interested in oral storytelling and how you tell stories. I mean, because we've kind of it's something we seem to have lost nowadays. But the way that back in the day, people would tell each other stories, and that's how things would get passed down from like through generations, through countries,
Yeah,
through borders, and that kind of we've kind of lost that art a little bit of passing those stories to each
Mm.
other.
I agree.
I will. I will also say, Ben, and this is slightly less sort of nice. When you messaged me earlier to say, "I'm just waiting on one thing about my story," I've had to ask permission to tell it, knowing that the prompt was first time. I was like,
Oh right, okay, I see.
Oh.
who is he had to dredge up on Facebook and be like, "Hey, you don't remember me probably, but when we were like 15."
Why would I subject you to such a fucking awful story?
He was crap. I was crap. It was crap. Oh god, I still need like 1,496 words.
But yes, I had a lot of fun writing it, and the guy whose experience this was is happy with it and is very keen that it's put out there. So there we are. It's been
Great.
put out there. Well, thanks for that feedback. That was all really nice, very engaging.
It was. I mean, we didn't talk a huge amount about we took the actual quality of the writing, but it was just very evocative. That's the word I keep landing on
Yeah,
in
it
my head.
was.
Just it in its purest form of because it's a true story, but then sort of told through the lens of storytelling. It has everything it needs to be just a nice captured moment. And yeah, I think, like I said before, just very well played and well delivered as well, which I think is important that it was delivered very cleanly and like someone remembering instead of like a story.
Hmm.
It was, yeah,
Oh, it's
very
appreciated. It's
impressed, man.
kind, very kind. Well, Melody, if you're ready, we're happy to
Sure.
listen to your entry.
I guess the
Okay.
main course.
Yep. Okay, first time. Polly was outside a Victoria station, huddled by a newspaper fire lit in an old tin drum. In her many layers, wool and corduroy and what looked like chintz from a pair of old curtains, she was the size and girth of a huge brown bear. Her face was dirty with soot. She wore a dead raccoon, a mangy tail, fashioned into a strange hat on her head. The strangeness did not matter. It was the strangeness that Miriam liked best. The way there was no word, no way to pin and hold it. The way the strangeness wriggled. An accordion next to Polly was pulling out a tune. It was Jingle Bells. Across the road, the Society of Good Christian Wives, a 12-woman choir, were vying with bells and cymbals, belting out a version of We Three Kings. Miriam, on approach, she was pressed here and there by the Christmas crowd, unruly with sharp elbows. Hard boots wanted nothing more than to flee. But she forced herself forwards. The fleeing was a coward's game, a giving in to the damp embarrassment. The fleeing was not the action of the sophisticated woman that Miriam was trying so hard to emulate. Ficus carica, common fig, as worn by Eve. When the time came, Miriam too would find and wear that leaf. She caught Polly's eye square. The expression might have been mocking, but Miriam chose not to see that. She thought, I would like to be alone in my room with her, and this was enough to propel her forwards. Miriam had never been alone in her room with anyone. She had taken advice from Sita in accounts, and with a little hand-held mirror, the pamphlet, if you could call it a pamphlet, she had opened her legs and examined herself. It was biology and science. Contrary to popular opinion, it was not sin. The holy book had made an error, and in that error it had swatted dead half the world. It was a swatting that came with its own set of conveniences. She approached Polly, a jangle of nerves, damp palms, a sweaty back. She's here, she's actually here. Allowed herself to smile, to dream. I will take her to the Ritz. We will walk across St. James's Park. I will show her the Black Swan. We will feed the ducks and geese. I have money enough for tea and for cake. The coins clinked, a pleasing sound in her trouser pocket. Miriam had washed her hair, slathered the tips with her brother's waxy cream, and though the effect was a little askew, the effort had been made. All right, Poll, Polly cut in. My husband's over there. And she said it with cold calculation, as though there had never been any first kiss between them, as though her husband was always going to be standing across the street. Miriam felt the scratch. She had approached with an open, curious heart, and it was Polly herself who had arranged the tryst, only to speak of husbands. Miriam had read enough novels to have learnt by now of the games that were played between lovers. Was Polly her lover? She didn't even know. There was longing, but what lay beneath that longing? Was there even any substance to it? What Miriam did know was that there were too many husbands in the world. Her heart was feeling uncommonly tender, so she hardened her features to sit along a set of severe lines. She said, Do you want to go for a walk? Can't. He's watching. Why am I here then? Miriam was being ungracious, had not meant to be ungracious. Polly spoke in a low voice, eyes darting to a man standing across the road, and a man whom Miriam did not dare turn around to look at, though she wanted nothing more than to see what this husband looked like. Miriam said, Tomorrow, meet me on the steps of the Tate. Will he be watching again? What can I say? My husband loves me. Miriam couldn't help herself then. She dropped, turned her chin with sly purpose, feigning an examination of the society of good Christian wives, focusing particularly on their choice of footwear. The footwear was tellingly poor. Next to that gaggle of wives, the husband. He had a boy's beauty, ragged, all cheekbones, dark eyes, and swagger enough to contend with an alley cat. He was flicking a coin, catching it, throwing it, swift and deft. I hate him, thought Miriam. In all her fevered conceptions of Polly, the ones that kept her up at night, spoke of unmentionable longing, she had not once stood back to allow that the husband might be handsome. She had conjured him, old and spent. He saw her looking, tipped his hat. There was a challenge in the movement, there was even flirtation. God, it was disgusting. Polly sighed with mock irritation, a tut for Miriam's attention. She rolled her eyes at the accordionist, who smiled with a missing tooth. Polly whispered, "Go on, Miriam. Let's try again tomorrow." "All right," mumbled Miriam, feeling stupid, because what she'd really wanted to say was no.
I loved that a lot.
Oh,
Thank you.
Absolutely transported me.
there was some fantastic language in there.
Oh, thank you.
Not only was there some fantastic language, it was just the tone of it, and like the scene setting, and like every little bit of that story really sang out what the themes were. Really, really nice bit of writing. That love it.
Thank
Really
you.
liked it.
Always really sensitive to descriptions of music. And you had two really good lines at the beginning. One was
Yeah.
talking about the accordion pulling out a tune,
Mhm.
which, obviously two layers to that, the movement of the accordion, but also that kind of, it's not a tune that's coming naturally. Loved it. But also the bells belting out a version of We Three Kings.
Mm.
Paints such a lovely picture of the mess they must have been making of that carol. Just, yeah. I was immediately in. Loved it.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed writing it.
It felt like you enjoyed writing it. I think, like, which
Yeah.
is a really nice feeling to when you see someone's like really flexing themselves inside the writing. It really works.
But yeah, I have to admit, I'm working on something at the moment that's set in 1945. And because I've been writing in that era, everything that I write, such as this short story as well, everything is kind of in that era because I'm in that world and they're the kind of voices that I'm sort of speaking with each day. So it might have felt a bit old-fashioned, but yeah.
I think there was a bit of that in there, but I think that was fine because it just felt like a period piece. That was
Yeah.
Wielded deftly is how I like. If you listener want to go back and listen to the some of the write likes where I've had to write in some more historical styles, you'll see what it's like when someone does that rather badly.
you're being a bit
That
harsh on yourself there, but yeah, it's
I am not. If you want to see someone do airport lit badly, go and listen to Ben on Tom Clancy. So
So there were a few lines that really stuck out for me though. Like, so you're saying that the music was where you were first in, Nico. For me, it was that description of this chintz bear. You know,
Oh yeah.
like I got a real sense of this person just from what they were wearing, and then you just never stopped having just little turns of phrase that changed something from being everyday into something that was a real hook and engaging bit of writing. This concept of sorting dead half the world. To sort something dead is a really nice turn of phrase, I thought. Um, Feeling the scratch rather than, there's lots of like imagery about like claws and stuff to do with like in particular like, female squabbling, but just that little tiny little hint for that was just enough to give me the emotion that people would be feeling on both sides of that conflict.
Yeah.
in that cat metaphor, there was probably my favorite line in the whole thing was swagger enough to contend with Alley Cat.
I
I
literally
Yeah, mine-
hate him, thought Miriam.
Yeah.
That was my favourite line as well. I loved writing that. I spent ages trying to think if he was an animal, what animal would he be?
But it's particularly the I hate him, thought
Yeah.
Miriam. Just
Yeah.
there's so much real in that. There's so much of of Miriam. Like it cements her of the, you know, she's like you say playing the part of the woman, and it's all flowery language, and then it just comes straight back into no, I hate him.
Yeah.
We often sometimes find that we very rarely get anything anywhere near each other in terms of what we choose, what we've chosen to write. Because
Yes.
Nico and I, we go into this just as blind as you've done with
Yeah.
in terms of what you didn't know what we'd written and we didn't know what you'd written. But there's always some kind of link between the stories that you can find,
Hmm.
and the big one, at least so far, between our stories, despite the prompt being about first time, it's got nothing to do
Yep.
with music, was the hymnal singing.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's particularly weird because, as Nick mentioned, I have a sincere aversion to this, that kind of religious caterwauling.
I do as well, like
Yeah,
really
how weird!
badly.
How
I really
weird!
hate it. So I've been thinking about religion a lot recently and my dislike of it and how to write about that. So I think it's creeping into all my writing.
I think you and I are going to see eye to eye on a lot of things. That's I like that. But
Hang on, I'm
it's
just adding the line, and they were singing a carol to my song.
hey,
Give me
there we
two
go.
minutes.
Unfortunately, it's time for the dessert to go out now, Nico. So you need to get it out there.
We chef. First time. It was a simple question, with an equally simple answer, but being asked it unexpectedly had forced me to explode into conscious clarity, and I realised that I'd been stood like an idiot for some time. I turned my head to examine the question asker. He was good looking, in that irritating sort of way that the people in advertisements for clothes are. Though truthfully, perhaps I just attributed them a degree of smugness, as they were the ones wearing expensive clothes in the pictures. Even thinking about them made my system-issued garments itch on my skin. Their one-size-fits-none approach rendered me a sexless meat puppet as always. I resisted the urge to scratch at my irritated skin, and instead responded. Yes. Like I said, a simple answer. Oh wow, don't meet many first-timers. I didn't like his warmth, or his easily assumed familiarity. Confidence to that degree isn't a trait I'd come across often, thankfully. So, how old are you? This question was an easy one too. 63. I felt it, in every bit of connective sinew, in every worn bone. He smiled at me like I was a child. It occurred to me in that moment that to him I almost certainly was. Oh yeah, I remember 63. You getting bad knees and the like. He puffed a casual sigh, somewhere between relief and terror. His face contorted in thought. The question wasn't so easy for him. I am 409. He laughed. Had to do a bit of cheeky maths there. His youthful face barely creased at the corners of the eyes. But something about those orbs themselves did show the twinkle of ancient. No, wisdom's too generous. Just ancientness. Windows to the soul. That's what my grandmother had said, wasn't it? Don't trust anyone if you look in their eyes and get the jitters, my grandpa would add. I missed them. My grandma knew tricks with fabric. She would have made these rags fit well. Feel soft. Wow, you're, very old. I didn't know what else to say. What else do you say? Fuck me, how much time have you stolen from the poor? How do you sleep at night? His face twisted in the recognisable mask of offence. Well, of course, this body's only 31. He puffed the chest, edging its way out of youthfulness into adulthood. His mouth had twisted back into its easy smile, that I could see now was truly a smirk. Yeah, I only tend to get to this age now. You know, when the joints start to go. He laughed again. It was an ugly, hollow thing. I hated him. No, I didn't, did I? I was jealous of him. No, bollocks. I hated him. He was a prick and he was flaunting the fact. You know how it is. He knew very well I didn't know how it was. I just told him this was my first time. As soon as the knee starts to ache and I have to start dating women with kids, I take another cycle. That laugh again. Over 400 years, I bet he's never laughed properly once, the smug bastard. I took a breath, because this was supposed to be a lovely moment for me, and I wasn't going to let this piece of work ruin it. There was too much built up. Literally generations of work had built to this moment. My parents' hadn't worn system-issued garments and taken body-breaking menial jobs to scratch pennies from their bones and save for this chance just so he could ruin it for me. And then I thought about the fact that this guy had been alive before them. Had had money before them. It cost so much more back then to be put into a new cycle. This man must have done it 6 times, 7, 10. I couldn't even imagine it. Of course, it got easier each time, didn't it? A 3-year-old with the accumulated memories of a previous lifetime obviously outshines a 55-year-old who's doing it on their first attempt. You learn how to make things work for you. The new you, anyway. And now I was about to have that opportunity. To be fused into a hollow infant's body, lab-grown and genetically matched to you. To wake up speechless and weak-legged and remember everything. To carry investments, if I had had any, into another life so they could mature for longer, make you richer, let you live forever, while generation after generation withered into nothingness. The have-nots. Those who worked to survive, not got to survive indefinitely and never worked a day. It's a dichotomy of existence that shouldn't exist. And I comforted myself with the thought that fairly soon it wouldn't. I know in many ways it would upset my forebears to know my plan. To know they'd worked so hard for this, and this was how I was going to spend generations of work. But I like to think that perhaps they would understand. Good for you, they'd say. Good for all of us. I'd become so deep in thought, I didn't actually know how many times he'd tried to talk to me. But his voice suddenly filled my head once more. Hey, young'un, you're up. He winked at me. Welcome to the big leagues. I held in the wad of phlegm that I wanted to spit into his face. Thanks, Chief. I gave a weak 2-fingered salute, flicking them from my brow towards his taller frame. It was satisfying then, because he didn't know. He didn't know that embedded in me was enough genetic code to destroy the entire legacy of what they'd created here. To overload their system, destroy its infrastructure, render their flesh fail-safes useless. He didn't know I'd worked for 47 years, from boy with a brush to trusted caretaker, to learn everything I could about this monstrous system. He didn't know it had design flaws. He didn't know the reasons you had to queue so long to use it, the reasons it costs so much. The fact they can't build another because the resources are all gone. And I'll be dead, technically, by the time my work is done. But that's the status quo restored. Nature triumphant. First time? The nurse asks me, as she lays me onto the cold table. No, I reply. Last.
What a story. Love that
Amazing.
concept.
Mm.
Yeah. Amazing is the right word. I think that was really good. That
It
felt
was
like a really.
very chilling. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, it's quite right. You go for it.
I just felt it was very chilling. When things are written in that slightly dystopian way, when it's like the everyday, but slightly at an angle. So you're trying
Yeah.
to work out what that angle is because it could be like 5 minutes from now. It's that sort of so real and so frightening.
What thing
It's
in our society broke? We need to figure it out. Yeah.
yeah.
And has it already happened?
It's and it could have already happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
No comment.
The whole stuff about class division was really good. I think that's a theme that's developing in your writing. We were talking about with Melody mentioned that uh, discussing religion was becoming a part of her writing.
Yeah.
And I think discussing class is at least previous conceptions of class is becoming part of your style. I think
I
because
think
this must be the
so.
third or fourth time in recent months. I think.
Yeah, I think it's something that, especially as I get a bit older, I have a lot more focus on. Especially coming from, sort of Cockney lad done good by setting up a stall in a fish market
Mm,
to now, I've been to university. I write stories every week for a podcast.
yeah.
I work with computers. These are all things that a couple of generations ago were unattainable for my family, and it's yeah. I think in a way it helps me to keep hold of that a little bit of that sort of East London ideal, even if I am a big softie who writes songs.
You write rock songs, man. Like, it's not soft, is it? The
True. All right, I'll give you that.
um, yeah, I like it. I like seeing it because it feels like it's got a lot of depth to it, and when you apply it to like as Melody just said, like a dystopic, little bit of sci-fi in there, just like one thing that's changed, sort of thing, like one technology and how's it affecting society. Having a through line through that you have a really serious emotional connection to. It elevates writing for sure, and that felt very elevated. It was very good. It has your normal way with words, which is extraordinary, and then also was a really engaging concept. I really liked this idea of, but body swapping onto the next one, and yeah, really, I had a lot of good things, good emotions when I was listening to that in terms of how like horrendous this rich kid was,
Yeah.
and that there is a sort of moment of cheering at the end, isn't it? When you realise that that guy's not going to get another body.
Yeah. But it felt very complete as a story as well, which I think it's quite hard to make something of 1,000 words also feel like a complete story. But this did feel very contained, and it felt like like a standalone piece, I thought, which worked really well.
It was an interesting one because like the concept came very quickly of, oh, what if this was someone's first attempt at kind of getting to be reborn,
Hmm.
and it took a little while before I think Ben's landed on the right thing. Whenever I'm really thinking about stories at the moment, it comes back to the whole class traitor thing. And I thought, yeah, but if that did exist, it would only be the billionaires that could do it
Yeah.
anyway. Oh shit, I'm writing a story. Oh no, it's happened.
No hymnal singing though, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to mark it down.
No, but I did. So I completely forgot I had the line "I hate him"
I
in
thought,
my.
yes, I meant to say, yes.
I just completely bigged up you having that line, forgetting I had like the same moment in my story. So now
I
I
know.
just feel like a twat.
As soon as I heard you read it, I had a little smile going, oh, yeah.
You're like, yes, here's the narcissism required. Lovely, jubbly. Well,
I'm genuinely glad you guys enjoyed it.
I did. I
Yeah,
thought
I enjoyed both stories. I enjoyed them both, and I loved how different they were as well.
I
it's.
yeah, I could say the same about both of yours. Both fab.
I'd dare to go as far to say it's normally the other way around, isn't it? For us, Nico, like I think you often ground stuff a bit more in reality, and I perhaps more commonly reach for the sci-fi Maybe I don't know. We tend to write everything, really, don't we? But
I mean, not to start any internet rumours, but perhaps we're rubbing off on each other, Ben.
you're disgusting. Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For magnificent beardery, let's cast the Chinicus folliculale spell on Gary Laird. For rich ginger tones on the scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?